Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Light Side Podcast. My name is Shilla, and today we have a beautiful friend who I've had the pleasure of meeting through Instagram and learning from more formally as a student and a mentee. Tati Petkovich is an astrologer and brand strategist living in Toronto, Canada. She's run her own business for over 10 years and currently reaches millions of people on TikTok with her astrology knowledge. You may have also seen her on Instagram or YouTube. She has a master's in digital media from Toronto Metropolitan University and background in graphic design and creative direction. She currently helps spiritual entrepreneurs use astrology to build and grow their brands on social media in a sustainable way for their business so that they can make a lasting, healing, positive impact on the world. And I can firsthand attest to her incredible wisdom and knowledge. She has such a gift for communicating and sharing her wisdom with others. And I'm so thrilled to have Tati on. So excited to dive into our conversation on astrology, learning about the stars and deciphering what is such a complex topic. Whether you're an astrology enthusiast or curious about how it impacts your life and your business, this episode is for you. Tati, it's such a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Tati, could we start by telling everyone a bit more about yourself and how you got started on this journey of being an astrologer and what inspired you?
For sure. I honestly didn't resonate growing up as a Leo, which is super interesting. And I started to get into astrology when I was in my undergrad because my friend had gifted me a book called The Big Book of Birthdays. And it was really specific to that specific date. And I resonated with it so deeply. I was like, how does this book know my life? And I remember just receiving that and thinking, okay, this is something I want to learn more of, but I have no knowledge how to do that. I then started to notice this pattern in my life where I only dated Scorpios. And I was like, why is this happening? Why do I keep attracting Scorpios? And this wasn't just in my undergrad. This was throughout my entire life, like from elementary school to middle school to university to my master's program. I was just like, what is happening right now? So mind blowing to me. Now I understand because I can read my birth chart as to why that happened. However, at that time, I just wanted to figure out why. And then I had a really difficult breakup from one of the Scorpios. And essentially, I got a birth chart reading done from one of my mentors, and it completely changed my life. I realized so much about my family patterns in such a different way than therapy, which I went through for years, but it gave it a different perspective of my life where I decided after that birth chart reading, I just need to study. I did that through a mentor and then quite a few courses and then more mentors. And then after some encouragement from one of my mentors, I decided to launch my practice after a few years.
I love that. It sounds like you followed your curiosity and your intuition led you to where you needed to be. And it's so I love what you also said about finding a pattern of dating similar signs. And I think that's super interesting. I'd love to dive into that too. I think for listeners who may not view astrology maybe exactly in the same light, could we spend a couple minutes talking about, in your own words and your perspective, what is astrology to you? So that we can all look at it the same lens. Because I think what tends to happen is astrology is this deeply complex topic that is almost simplified into just your sun sign for horoscope purposes, because it's so easy to be like, oh, if you're born from March 20th through April this year, this sign. Whereas obviously that depends on the year. There's so much more to it than that. And I think that's what maybe tends to shy skeptics away from astrology. And I know that if you're listening, you're probably not a skeptic, but it's more so there are people who doubt astrology a little bit because they're like, no, like my horoscope isn't what I'm experiencing today. Or I'm not a Virgo. I was on the cusp of Aquarius, Capricorn. And I thought I was a Capricorn most of my life. Then I realized I was actually an Aquarius. And I was like, what? I was so confused. And so I just thought it'd be interesting to give everyone a background of the way you describe astrology in simple terms. And we can dive into it a little bit more from that angle.
Yes, for sure. My interpretation of astrology, it's essentially a tool to help us understand ourselves in a deeper way. It's a tool for meaning making, which has been really pivotal for me in terms of my healing journey. It's a tool for empathy so that we understand that we're all connected in some form, because another common misconception is I only have a few signs in my birth chart, but you actually have all the zodiac signs in your birth chart. We can always get into that a bit more, but I do agree. A lot of the misconception is not my sun sign, or it's just this one sign, but really it is this beautiful concept of this is a snapshot of the sky at the exact moment of your birth for your birth chart. And it allows you to understand yourself in a way where you can see certain character traits, you can see certain patterns, and astrology helps guide us in a way where we can understand why we have certain patterns. It's just pattern recognition, which can really help us throughout life. It helps us understand the psychology behind certain aspects of ourselves and understanding, okay, how can I use this tool to better understand my relationships, to better understand my business, to better understand my career, but also for more self-love, which I honestly believe can help heal the world.
Absolutely. I love that. That's very beautifully said. I love what you said in terms of being a snapshot. And I honestly do see it as this alchemy of energies that make you the way you are, in a sense, or the way you tend to lean towards a blueprint. You can lean into different aspects more or less because we have free will and we have the ability to exercise different parts of who we are, but it's what comes natural to you. It's how I like to look at it. And one thing that I want to share with listeners is so hard to deny when you look at the grand scheme of things. When you see us on this planet Earth just spinning so astonishingly, it's just spinning in the middle of the universe all around us, they're massive, especially in comparison to our size. And everything is energy, right? Everything is made up of energy. You can see it with the waves, the high tide at the ocean. Everything is impacted by the moon. Similarly, the other planets' energies impact us too. And like we might not see it. So it makes it easier for us to deny it. But just because we don't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. And so I feel like our evidence is the tide of the moon, is the vibrations we feel with music, with sound baths, with all sorts of things. I've tried to deny it because I have a logical, analytical mind, but I cannot deny the fact that I feel their energy impacting us. And so we're going to get into and learn more about that because like you just mentioned, there's just so much more to astrology than just identifying with our sun sign. Personally, I can feel my moon sign in my chart. It made a lot of sense to me once I learned about it because I was like, wow, I've had so many Scorpio friends or people that were water signs that I got along with so well. And as an Aquarius, they're being an air sign. You're supposed to be friends more with other air signs or fire signs. You can be friends with everyone. The compatibility aspect. And I had so many water sign friends, but then I learned that, oh, it's probably my moon sign that is impacting, or I have a Capricorn stellium, which I learned from you. There's so much to it than just what our sign is. And as you can tell, I get really excited about this topic. Maybe we can talk about the natal chart as an intro of the various signs that have a significant impact on us in terms of their energy. Because like you mentioned, we have all the signs in our chart, but which ones tend to have a greater say?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I love what you said about your moon sign because honestly, I think the moon sign is the gateway drug to learning more astrology. I personally believe that because when I found out about my moon sign, which I'm a Cancer moon, I was like, oh, this makes sense because
Yeah.
I'm so emotional. I can feel everything. I'm super intuitive and I could pick it up. And I'm sure you felt the same way as a Scorpio moon. And I deeply resonated with just knowing, okay, this is my moon sign. This makes sense. So understanding your moon sign, your rising sign, also known as the ascendant sign, and then your sun sign, those are most commonly known as the big three. And that's a good introduction so that people can just dip their toes into their birth chart because I really feel as though it helps us see more of who we are in terms of your sun sign is your ego, your will, your identity. It is how you shine in the world. Whereas your rising sign is your perspective on life and the world. It is going to dictate your chart ruler, which I would say is such an underrated part of your birth chart because your chart ruler really shows you the major themes of your life. And that's something people could definitely explore. I have a few videos on that too that are on YouTube. It really helps us understand, okay, what are the lessons I'm learning this lifetime? What will I come across? And how do I really overcome this? So for myself, it was learning these aspects, but then also your Mars sign, which is how you take action, how you work, what job is actually really good for you based on your Mars sign. There's also your Venus sign, which is how you show love and affection. And there's honestly so many amazing parts of your birth chart that you can tap into. For example, one of my favorites is Jupiter because Jupiter is the planet of luck, expansion, opportunity. So knowing your Jupiter sign, knowing how to tap into it, as you said before, that you can lean into certain aspects of your birth chart so that you can really tap into the abundance of your life and what makes you uniquely abundant, which I love talking about Jupiter. So I have a whole course on just Jupiter because I feel like it's super magnetic. It really helps us understand why does abundance look different for me specifically than a different person. May that be through money, may that be through relationships, may that be through other areas. But those are just some places to just dip your toes into your birth chart because there's so much more we can go into.
And speaking to your Jupiter course, I've taken it. Sorry, have a little cough going. And I found it really fascinating to understand. Okay, I do have a lot of Capricorn in my chart, and I have a Taurus midheaven and a Sagittarius Mars, but my Jupiter is in Cancer. That is such a difference to energy than those other signs. And it's so fascinating. One question I have is like when you're talking about the different aspects that have empowering impact, like something for me as a consumer of astrology and just I love to learn more about it. And I love your courses. I think you do such an amazing job of breaking down this information into digestible, understandable, applicable pieces of information. It's so helpful. How does one differentiate between the midheaven and a rising sign or the ascendant? Because to me, I see them as a bit similar.
Yeah, your rising sign and ascendant sign, that is really pivotal because that is the exact moment of your birth. And if you are off by a few minutes, perhaps even down to the minute for some cases, that would change your entire birth chart.
Wow.
That is a really pivotal point of this is how you came into the world. So that is why it makes such a huge impact on your life. So your rising sign is how you perceive the world. There's this common misconception with the rising sign of it's the mask you wear to protect yourself. And I don't think that's true at all. Honestly, your rising sign also dictates your first house, which is your house of self and identity. So it makes sense to identify with your rising sign, at least in some cases. It really depends on your chart ruler too. So if you don't identify as your rising sign, there's a lot more to go into as to why that may not be. Whereas your midheaven is the top of your chart. It is the highest point of your chart, meaning that it is who you are to the public and how the public perceives you. It gives you a better understanding of the legacy you're leaving behind in this world. And there is that misconception that it's just your career. However, it is also so much more than that, because your legacy can be, if you decide to be a mother, it could be the children you raise. It could be what wisdom are you giving your children, right? It could be if you go into a career, if you publish a book, it could be so many different aspects. So your midheaven is a really pivotal part of your chart, and people can perceive you as the midheaven because it is your outward facing energy of, this is what the public sees me as. So I always see the midheaven as, if you're being interviewed or you are on a podcast or you are doing these things, people perceive you as that sign in some regard. Whereas your rising sign, not everyone might see you as your rising sign, yet have that energy. It's more so like glasses that you wear to filter out a certain perspective.
Wow. That's so helpful. That clarifies so much for me because I think that was my biggest confusion. I was part of the misconception group of seeing the rising sign as like how you're perceived. It's like how the world views you. And I thought, wait, that's so similar to the midheaven, whereas that clarifies it. So really your rising is your path in life, the way I'm understanding it. It's the way you approach and view life. It's the shaper of your destiny, maybe. Whereas your midheaven is like how others maybe perceive you because of the way you approach your life experience and pursuing your career and what you do in the world, if I understand it correctly.
Yes. I would also say, if you're reading horoscopes, please read for your rising sign first, because that's super important, because that is the exact time of birth. So you should always read for your rising sign first, more so than your sun sign, because that will give you a more accurate description of what's happening for you. I would also say, when you mentioned destiny, I love looking at the North and South node for destiny, because the North node is where you're heading this lifetime. It's the fulfillment that you'll receive if you tap into that energy, whereas your South node is your comfort zone and what you're leaving behind and the ancestral patterns you're breaking and your past lives. I also have a whole course on the North and South node because I just find it so fascinating. That is also an area of our chart where we can look into as to our life path, which you mentioned. Whereas the rising sign is how we approach that life path.
Got it. Wow. And that's why everyone is so unique, right? And I think this is, again, another thing that turns people away. They're like, I'm not like that. I'm not like that. But you have your own blend of signs based on the way they interact together and the way they shine off of each other and maybe dim each other. I love astrology so much. Throughout my career working in corporate America, I would always talk about astrology at work and I'd be like, oh my gosh, Mercury retrograde, for instance, every time it would hit, I work building tech and the wildest things would happen. And I'm like, it's Mercury retrograde. We shouldn't have planned a release during Mercury retrograde. And people are like, okay, Pershala, we should have done this. And just mentioning the retrograde and our reporting and stuff was funny. But at the same time, I got to hear a lot of people's perspectives on astrology. And I was like, no, there's houses. And people are like, what houses? What are you talking about? So maybe we can briefly tell people what astrologers talk about. And this is very advanced, I think. How would you add houses into the mix of what we just talked about?
Yes, your birth chart is separated into 12 houses, which you can call segments as well. Like, they're different components of your life. And understanding your houses and where planets fit within your houses and help you learn more about different aspects of your life. For example, your fourth house is the house of home and family, how you were raised, it is your roots, it is where you are very introspective and where you are most at home and what home actually looks like to you. So that can give you some really interesting, valuable information about yourself. Whereas your seventh house is the house of partnerships, and that is all one on one serious partnerships. Those are contracts, those are your romantic relationships, business partnerships, and friendships. But any type of one on one relationship would be really described in your seventh house, and understanding what kind of people you attract in your one on one relationships. Each house really describes a different area of your life, and depending on the sign of your house and the ruler of those houses and aspects to the ruler, that can give you a lot more information. I go through that in my Astrology Foundations course. It can be complex. It did take me a year of intense study to really click for me. Okay, this makes so much sense in terms of the mechanics of decoding your birth chart and understanding how to best use that energy. So another misconception is, oh, my house is empty. My second house is empty. Understanding your birth chart is knowing that there are no such thing as empty houses, because there's always going to be a ruler of the house, and you can find out so much information based on that ruler.
Wow, that's super intriguing. My mind goes to, okay, when you look at compatibility charts, for instance, right? Personally, as a female who is a hopeless romantic, I love looking at compatibility charts. And I see, for instance, if my Venus is in Capricorn, but if my seventh house is, I don't know actually off the top of my head, but let's say it's in Aquarius or in Gemini, or like maybe a more free spirited sign than Capricorn. Would you say my Capricorn overpowers the house placement, or does the house placement dilute the energy of the Capricorn? You know what I mean?
Yes. And I think what's really interesting for you, it's funny you said Aquarius. So Aquarius does rule your seventh house, because
Oh,
I know your birth chart pretty well. And for you, it would be looking at the ruler of the seventh house, which would be Saturn. And Saturn for you, it's looking where Saturn falls into your birth chart. But the interesting thing is, yes, your Venus is in Capricorn, but then Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. So there's still that connection with Saturn, which is committed relationships, consistency, long-term vision, setting proper boundaries, but then also having this commitment of longevity and understanding what feels stable and grounded, and having a plan in a sense. So that can be a really good indicator of your relationships and what that looks like for you in some ways, or what you value as well with Venus and Capricorn. I don't know if that resonates.
yeah, it does. That makes sense. In a nutshell, it's not exactly what meets the eye. There's just so much more to it. So if it doesn't click yet, or if it doesn't resonate yet, there's more to unfold. Or what I just thought of is like that. There's a popular saying, especially in the self-help world, that says you have to know where you are in order to get to where you're going. And I feel like astrology gives you that tool to be like, okay, this is where I'm at, to better understand where you're at, and maybe then help you really get a full 360 view of, okay, this is now what I want to focus on. This is what I want to shine light on. This is what I want to improve on. I think it's such a great tool for self-discovery and beyond. One thing I want to talk about is birth chart readings, as well as solar return readings. You've done one for me, and I am so mind blown actually, because we did it around my birthday at the beginning of the year. I asked you some questions and just sharing kind of thoughts and ideas I had. And you also shared with me what you would recommend based on my birth chart. And it's so fascinating to look back and see that thankfully I didn't make certain decisions because I would be like in a pickle, thanks to your advice. And also, it would have cost me financially, honestly, to have done what I was planning on doing. I'm just like, so fascinated that you were able to like share and see what you shared and saw. As somebody who's dabbled in this stuff for a long time, I'm not gonna lie, I am a little bit reluctant about forecasting or foretelling because everything can change at any time. And I have that view. You told me that like me and my boyfriend would be traveling potentially a lot. And I thought, okay, yeah, maybe once or twice we're planning on traveling. I didn't take any of it too seriously, but a lot of it is true and has happened. Can you share more about how that works and how one can use their birth chart and astrology to help themselves?
I'm so happy that it did help. So I would say for your birth chart, you can really use it in so many different ways. I personally love using it for my business. I love using it for my relationships. I'm going to use this as an example. I remember I couldn't keep a 9 to 5 job, to be honest. When I graduated my undergrad degree, I just kept getting into really toxic, manipulative companies that were terrible for me. And I was like, what's going on? Why is this happening? And the thing is, I was not built for 9 to 5. You could see this in my birth chart. Yet at that time, I thought something was wrong with me. I thought, oh my goodness, why is this so difficult? Why is this happening? And then understanding my birth chart, I realized I need to just embrace what I have, and I have to embrace the qualities I have, because entrepreneurship was meant for me, even though it's been a very difficult journey for myself. If I had my birth chart years ago, this was in my undergrad, I feel I could have saved myself so much grief and so much pain and angst, because I just didn't understand why I was meant to build my own business at that time. So that's just one example. And then when you mentioned your solar return reading, I find them to be so fun to do. That is essentially your chart for the year ahead. And this means that you still have your birth chart, you still have that energy of your natal chart. However, your solar return chart just gives you the energy of what you can expect by major themes that will happen for you, and then you can best prepare for that. And may that be through any business investments that you want to make, or may that be through a relationship. I find solar return charts super fascinating because for me, I've noticed just seeing my solar return charts from previous years, which if anyone studies astrology who's listening to this, looking at that helped me understand which years I got into really serious relationships. And for me, it freed me from overthinking getting into a romantic relationship, because I'm like, you know what? It's not a main focus this year. That's okay. I'm going to embrace that. And I'm going to just wait till it's meant for me in the best possible timeline. So there's so many ways to use your birth chart to your benefit. There's so many ways to use your solar return, birthday, essentially reading for yourself to plan your year ahead. And sometimes it's okay to not take everything to heart, which I love your perspective, but it's okay. How can I use this information to my benefit? And how can I know from this knowledge to best navigate the energy of the year? That's what I love helping people with, because at least they have that confidence in navigating any challenges that come their way that year.
I love that. And it's true. I love the fact you mentioned having a theme for your year. That has been so true in my 20s. I was single for a very long time, actually, for a good 10 years. And it was just like my focus wasn't on relationships. Deep down, I wanted a relationship, especially later and when I'm to my 30s. But prior to that, I was just like, that's not my focus right now. And knowing that gives you so much more peace and enjoyment in the now, right? You can just enjoy what is. Okay, this is my era to grow and work on myself. And you're always going to be growing. Obviously, nothing has to be mutually exclusive, but it's nice to hear that and know that, okay, just because I'm in this phase of my life now or in this stage of my journey doesn't mean it's forever. Nothing is forever. It's just a transitory period. And like astrology can give you that insight in terms of my doing what makes me shine the most. Like, am I doing the things that celebrate my best qualities? And I honestly can't recommend Tati's reading more. It's so profound to have a reading and to understand, okay, how can I best improve my business? How can I equip myself more using my birth chart? What would you say are some ways or tips that someone that wants to incorporate astrology into their life?
Yes, I love that question. I would say if you're a beginner to astrology, I think reading your weekly forecast so that you can just plan your week can feel really exciting, but also feel better prepared of any intense days. I do have a free weekly forecast on my newsletter because that kind of just gives you the information of, okay, this major thing is happening this day. Do not overbook yourself if you're very busy because you don't want to be crying in the washroom, even though you might need that and it's a good release. But it's understanding, okay, actually, can I plan so that I can have that self-care and that compassion and grace for myself so that I can better take care of myself throughout the week. That's what I love doing for my weekly forecasts. Yet another thing that you can do is there are certain days of the week that you can use astrology to plan your week ahead. I have a free YouTube video on that. You can just schedule out your week based on the planetary days. So, for example, Mercury Day is on Wednesdays, and that's a great day for meetings and communication. So that kind of gives us a better understanding of, okay, I want to schedule out all my meetings on Wednesdays and Thursdays, which is what I've done for myself. So it's understanding, okay, I could use this to plan ahead to just feel in flow, the most alignment and flow that's possible. It really has changed my life in that way. And if you already know a bit of astrology, it could be looking at your transit chart and understanding how the specific energy of the day is affecting you specifically. And that can give you a better sense of, okay, how can I use the energy of today that is specific to me so that I can just have more fun during the day? Or how can I have more peace during the day? Whatever you're craving, a transit chart for the day can help you get to that point, or it could just make sense and process, okay, why was today so hectic or chaotic? And you can see a transit chart and that can give you more information in terms of that. If that's something people are interested in, that is also in my Astrology Foundations course where I will help you understand your transits, because that's been pivotal for me in terms of just processing, oh my goodness, what is happening today? And that helped me just feel more at peace of the chaos of if everything is just a transit. Knowing transits can help you see the astrology of the day to day will always change. And that's so freeing. That is so amazing because that means that you have a new beginning every single day. There's new energy every single day. And that can just be such a freeing concept to have.
Totally. I couldn't agree more. It can be so pivotal to have these tools on your personal growth journey in the sense that so much of experiencing the now moment and your life to its full potential comes down to being able to accept the now moment and accept what is. And that equals accepting the chaos with the good and the ease and the calm. It's just accepting all the weathers, right? And it's like the earth in of itself shows us that, look, the weather's always changing. So same as the weather that we can tangibly see, the energy we cannot see, unfortunately. And that's why I think makes it hard for people to believe this stuff sometimes. But the energy, just like the weather changes, it's just not visible to the eyes, but we feel it. And we are multi-sensory human beings. And for a reason, we feel the energy change. We feel some days are really tough. There are times where I've messaged you, what's happening? So today is really hard, or this past few days are so crazy. And you've been able to shed light. But it's true that once there's a sense of ease that comes with that, okay, all right, it's just a matter of accepting it and allowing it. And the faster we accept it, the sooner it passes for us in terms of our experience, because we're not resisting it, because resistance is what makes it persist more and feel harder and more challenging. And once we accept it, it's almost like we become in harmony with it. And so one thing I want to add is I've been following Tati's work for a long time and I've been reading her horoscope. I don't see it as a regular horoscopes. I see it as to be so much more than that. I think I'm one of the people who was, I don't really believe these, but based on what you just said, I wasn't reading my rising sign. I was reading my sun sign. But the point being is I find your horoscopes to be super, super helpful and just fun. Also, I've found recently a lot of it has been super on point throughout time. It's been on point. There's been times where you mentioned you may get pivotal news around this day, and it's happened. You can explore for yourself to see what resonates with you, of course. I love that you have the podcast, you have your Substack, which gives the written version, and there is your videos on Instagram, YouTube. They're also helpful. I'm just saying, as somebody who consumes your content, I love them. And I think that others can benefit from it too, especially your courses, because there's a lot. Tati does this full time and she brings so much to the table. So you have tons of resources online in terms of courses, the information you share on your podcast and your community and on Instagram, TikTok. What are books, resources, or tools that you recommend for beginners in astrology? Maybe this is your own course. Where would you suggest people to start?
Yes, for sure. So I'll recommend my mentor's books on astrology because they are written in a way where anyone can understand them. And it's so helpful and really gives you a great perspective. So one of my mentors, Annabelle Gatt, she wrote the Moon Sign Guide, and we talked a lot about moon signs. Love her book. My other mentor, Eliza Kelly, she has This Is Your Destiny. I love how she broke it down. It really helps you see astrology as such an immense spiritual tool. So I highly recommend that. Another one of my friends wrote Self-Care by the Signs. Her name's Valerie Tehega, and I think that's on Audible. It's really helpful if you just want to use astrology for self-care, which I highly recommend. And if you are into poetry and astrology, I do have a poetry book called Revisions of the Moon that is really astrology inspired. So you can also take a look at that.
I love that. I'm going to add them to my list. There's also so many apps out there, and I'm curious what you like because I've used Pattern, CoStar, Time Passages. There's Chani. There's just so many. What do you suggest? Which one do you like?
I personally love Time Passages the most in terms of just getting a birth chart. It's just so aesthetically pleasing to look at the chart. It just is so easy to read for myself. Personally, I use it for all of my birth chart readings in terms of the desktop version, but they have a mobile app version. I do love Chani's app too. I think it's really fun. And I also love the Pattern, even though that's more so like a guilty pleasure because you won't understand all of the transits with the Pattern. It's more so, oh, what is the perspective of this in terms of how they're portraying this? So I like their perspective in terms of certain transits. That's more so for fun. But I think if anyone wants to learn astrology, I highly recommend Time Passages.
Time Passages is very detailed. And I want to echo this for whoever's listening. Of course, there are ways that you can dive deep on your own and learn these things, but there is a lot of value in talking to an astrologer. And it can be overwhelming to read all of the varying perspectives on all the aspects and trying to connect the dots and bring them all together. There's just so much value in doing an actual readings. I know Tati has a wait list, but I do recommend it a lot. You just get different experiences. In terms of what's happening in the skies right now, I think we have a Mercury retrograde coming up. What are certain trends that people should be aware of in the coming months and whatnot?
Yes. Oh my goodness. So we do have a Mercury retrograde in the signs of Virgo and Leo from August 5th to the 28th. And I'm calling August a brat summer because very trendy. I do think it's going to be a really fun, interesting month. A lot of drama, but if you like drama, then, August is for you because we also have Mars in Gemini.
Oh, wow.
That'll be interesting. With Mercury retrogrades, I always recommend it's not something to be afraid of. Do not fear. Mercury retrograde, it's the most popular transit that people hear of, but I think people are so afraid of it. But actually, a really amazing times for self-reflection and slowing down and double checking your emails and contracts and just reconnecting with old friends and soaking in nostalgia. So there's still some really lovely qualities to a Mercury retrograde. So I do want to state that. But again, it can be a little bit frustrating because things are delayed, things are slowed down. So take time to plan that out. I wouldn't launch anything new during a Mercury retrograde unless you're relaunching something previously. That's just a recommendation. I've still done it. I have Mercury retrograde in my natal chart, so I'm used to the energy. And at the end of the year, we have a Mars retrograde in Leo, which is going to be really interesting. It will take up most of December and it will still be retrograde next year in 2025. Yet it will retrograde back into Cancer. That will be an interesting time of reassessing our work and how we take action. Dating wise, that can be interesting and can bring up people from the past for sure. Mercury retrogrades do that as well. We also have the eclipses happening later in the fall, and we'll be moving from the eclipses in the Aries Libra axis into eclipses in the Pisces Virgo axis. So that's going to be a huge major shift. I have a free report on that if anyone's interested in that, because I can talk about that for like hours because it's really fascinating to just see those patterns, to see what changes emerge, because that will give us some pivotal themes for the next year and a half. Yet those are some things to watch out for the end of the year. But I will say a brat summer for August. So hopefully you can enjoy that.
That is such a concoction of energies with Leo, Virgo, and Gemini. And I'm here for it. I'm excited. I'm also curious. You mentioned the retrograde. Is Pluto moving back to Aquarius? I'm so curious how that's going to impact the landscape of the global landscape. Pluto and Aquarius is blowing my mind recently, though.
Yes. Oh my God. I'll just say quickly with Pluto and Aquarius, Pluto is currently retrograding back and it will retrograde back into the sign of Capricorn. It's still technically in Aquarius right now, but it will move back into Aquarius at the end of this year to next year. And that will create this massive shift for us for the next 20 years. Wow. So fixed signs will really feel this intensity in terms of Leo, Aquarius, Taurus, Scorpio. But this huge shift from Pluto in Capricorn, which we had for, I would say, 18, 19 years, to Pluto in Aquarius, which we'll have for 20 years, that's going to be monumental in terms of transforming our community, having essentially a revolution in a lot of cases, which we're already seeing across the globe. And I do think it'll be beneficial. Of course, it's going to be hard and chaotic. All revolutions are. But I do think it's a really interesting transit to pay attention to and to see those shifts and changes across the globe.
Yeah. If people are interested, like Google or look into it, when Pluto first moved into Aquarius, it was like a big bang, right? Like last year. And it's really interesting to get that as a preview of what we're looking at maybe the next 20 years. Definitely keeps us on the edge of our seats. Tati, this just came to my mind. Do you think it'd be helpful to tell listeners about astrocartography, and then do you incorporate that into your practice?
Yes, I would say it is something that is super interesting to look into. I do love people to just test the waters just to see which line they currently live in. So basically, it's the study of how where you're living will affect the energy of your life. For myself, I have played around with it in terms of, okay, I went to visit my Venus line. Honestly, I don't use it too much for my practice because I didn't have the best experience on my Venus line, so that was a little bit disappointing. However, I do know that looking for where the sun is in terms of your line, in terms of where that would fall into based on the map of the world, and if you visit that certain location or this country, then you could potentially just feel very aligned and very empowered with your sun line. So I always recommend people to test that out if they love travel, if they love to explore. I personally love Toronto. I've always grew up in Toronto, but I realized for me, I live on my north node and it is really aligned to the work I'm doing. Yet, if people are just curious about moving somewhere in terms of work, or if they're curious about a vacation spot and they want a different experience and they want to feel something.
That's so interesting. Thank you for sharing all of this knowledge. I feel like we can talk for so long. I have so many questions that pop into my mind. I appreciate everything you put out there. It's fun, it's informative, and it is enlightening. I want to ask if you have any closing thoughts or points or advice, maybe things we didn't talk about with regard to astrology that you want to mention.
I would say to just have fun with it. I think people can get caught up of, oh, I don't believe in this, or I'm not seeing how this resonates with me. I think it's more so staying curious with astrology and being open to the possibilities of how it can impact you. I do want to say that before the age of 30, your chart won't be fully developed in terms of you might not resonate with your birth chart. You look at your chart at the age of 15 in comparison to the age of 25 because things are slowly unfolding throughout our life. Whereas if you're 30, where you're around your Saturn return, I think that is a very pivotal time for you to become an adult because your Saturn return is all about adulting up and learning hard lessons, but it really helps us understand our lives in a completely different way. So I would say that if you are still unsure about not resonating with your birth chart, just know there's so many components that you could look into. I always love looking at Chiron too, because that's how I found out why I don't resonate with my sun sign as Leo. And now I embrace being a Leo so much more because of my Chiron in Leo, because your Chiron is your deepest wounds and how you are really healing this lifetime and how you can help others heal. And for myself, it is in the sign of Leo. So I'm healing a lot with the fear of being seen, which I feel so many people can resonate with. It helped me understand my fear of being seen in a completely different light, why I had that fear, then also how I can help others work through that fear, because that's your natural gift as well. So I wanted to state that in case anyone is curious to look more into different elements of their birth chart to see what parts do they resonate more with and which parts can they really tap into to just feel more themselves and to learn more self-love and compassion and to overcome the mindset shifts that they might really need, which then they can message you for coaching, which I feel like would be super helpful in terms of the mindset work you do. And I think that would be really helpful for anyone who's struggling with the fear of being seen or struggling with certain mindset blocks, which we can see in our birth chart.
I love that. First of all, it's super helpful. I've learned so much through this conversation. Something we didn't get to touch on is how you grew your social media. And it sounds like you used what was your deepest wound in terms of being seen and feeling comfortable with that. Because Leo is a sign that's known to be comfortable having the spotlight. You've used that to help impact the lives of others, help others see where they are struggling with it potentially. And I would love to hear, if you don't mind to share. I think people are always interested in people's journeys and how they got to where they are. You have an incredible audience and also community. You have your own community that you meet with on a very regular basis, and people can join that community anytime. Maybe you can tell us more about that. If somebody is interested in starting their social media career, how they can learn from you.
Yes, thank you so much. I would say if anyone's looking to grow their business on social media or you're just trying to grow in terms of social media, I would always recommend to first make sure you know the reason why in terms of, is it to help more people? Is it to get more sales? Is it to build that community? figuring out your why is going to be really pivotal. I would also say consistency and building a routine that works for you, but your most fun, your most empowering routine as possible. I would say that social media is amazing in terms of the people you can reach and the people you can connect with, yet making sure you are overcoming those limiting beliefs around the fear of being seen. If someone is struggling with that and they want to grow, that's super important to do. I've used EFT tapping myself. I know you work with your clients on helping them through that with EFT. So I do want to mention that to reach out to you for mindset coaching if someone is struggling with that, because it is such a hard part. If we have this fear that someone's going to judge us if we are posting, or if we have this fear that our family is going to abandon us if we do this, which was honestly some of my fears when I first started. I remember just knowing that I knew I had to do it, and EFT tapping has helped me immensely in terms of that process. But working with a practitioner who knows how to use it can help you get those catered scripts that can really change your subconscious limiting beliefs. That's why I recommend your mindset coaching for that.
Thank you.
Yet I also think that overnight affirmations have really helped me with this too. Also, making sure you wake up and you have the best morning routine possible is going to be so pivotal, because you need to feel good. If taking the morning walk is going to help you, do that. I think setting up your day has been the most transformative thing for me, because my energy now, in terms of what I'm able to accomplish, is at least 5 times more than what it was 3 years ago because of my routine. Just knowing that resistance is coming up because of your limiting beliefs, that resistance, just procrastinating and being afraid, that is your limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
Just sneaking through.
Keeping ourselves safe, right? In our comfort zones, where the uncomfortable can also become comfortable. If we just trust and push ourselves to expand out of the parameters. I love how you said that. I think having a fueling morning routine, not just reaching for our phones and starting the day running out the door, massive difference, not only for your nervous system, but just your level of presence, engagement, enjoyment, how you just experience life changes massively and dramatically. There's so much to learn from Tati. If you don't, I encourage you to follow her on Instagram, TikTok. Love everything you do, your Substack. If you're on my newsletter, Sunday Tea, I recommend Tati's on mine. So you can go check it out. Why don't you tell us where people can find you online and learn more about your work and how they can work with you?
Yeah, for sure. If you have a spiritual business and you want to grow your business in a very sustainable way with astrology, with brand strategy, then you can check out my Boldest You mentorship program, which Shole is a graduate from. It is a really intensive but transformative program of getting you into that space of seeing what would make the most sense for your brand, showing up for your brand, getting consistent with it, and really attracting your dream clients from it in a sustainable way so you do not burn out. And another way you could potentially work with me, I do have a few spots left for birth chart readings for August. I have them very limited each month. So I do send out a newsletter about those. I have a few for August and a few for October, since I'm taking some time off in September. And I also have my moon sign creative community. So I host new moon and full moon events, and I do that every month. It's so much fun. It's essentially for you if you want to manifest in a community, which can amplify your manifestations, because everyone's at a very high vibration in terms of why they're there. They have that intention of making really supportive, encouraging, magical friends who love astrology, who love tarot, who love just seeing the magic of the mundane. So that's another way. Thank
I
you.
love it. So many ways that you can have Tati in your life. And Tati, I love everything that you do. I'm honored to have you on the podcast to share your light and your love and passion for astrology and what you know, an astrologer and a brand strategist. I'm excited for y'all to have a chance to connect with her on a more frequent and deeper level. Thank you all for listening. Please let us know if any questions. I will link Tati's information in the show notes. We appreciate you so much. And until next time, thank you.